There is a type of creature in this world, discovered by a few, but never confirmed to exist. We refer to these creatures as unidentified mysterious animals, or UMA for short. Hello everyone, welcome to the UMA video series. As we all know, walking upright is one of the defining traits of humans, a key feature that sets us apart from other primates. In cryptozoology, scholars refer to a type of creature that is not human but can walk upright and seems to possess some level of intelligence, as relic hominids or proto-humanoids. These are commonly known as wild men or Bigfoot creatures, possible surviving close relatives of humans, which is what makes this type of UMA so fascinating. Today, I'm going to talk about a creature from this category, a legendary forest dwarf tribe from East African folklore known as the Agui. The name Agui comes from Bantu languages spoken by the Korea and Wachaga people in Tanzania. However, because Bantu languages are extremely complex, and even within the same language, different tribes may use words differently, I couldn't find a clear meaning for the name. The Agui are usually described as small, brown or reddish-brown humanoid creatures covered in thick hair, standing about 4 to 5 feet tall, around 1.2 to 1.5 meters, walking upright like humans. They are said to live deep in the forests of East Africa, including Tanzania, Mozambique, and Kenya. Their movements are mysterious, and sightings are extremely rare. Most reports and written records about them date back to the early 20th century. In 1937, a British popular science magazine called Discovery, Volume 18, published an article titled Mystery Beasts of Africa. The author was Captain William Hitchens, a British colonial officer who we've mentioned before in our episode on the Nandi bear. Hitchens investigated 3 different unknown creatures in Africa: the Nandi bear, the Mungwa, and today's topic, the Agui. Among them, the Agui was the only one he claimed to have seen with his own eyes. In the article, Hitchens described the Agui as small, hairy people. He wrote, "The Agui are said to live in the forests of Usulu and Simbiti on the western edge of the Wembere Plains. A few years ago, I was sent to this region for an official hunting expedition. While waiting at a clearing for game, I saw 2 small creatures covered in reddish-brown hair emerge from the dense forest on one side, cross the clearing, and disappear into the underbrush on the other. They looked like tiny humans, about 4 feet tall, walking upright, covered in thick reddish-brown fur."
The local hunter who was with me was stunned, mouth wide open in shock. He said it was the Agui, a small, hairy humanoid that one might not even see once in a lifetime. I searched desperately for them, but in that nearly impenetrable forest, I found nothing. Maybe they were monkeys, but certainly not ordinary ones. They weren't vervet monkeys, nor baboons, nor Sykes monkeys, nor any known primate species in Tanzania. So what were they? The villagers told me strange stories about them. For example, if someone left a gourd of Maturu beer and a bowl of food in their fields, these little people would come at night, eat the offerings, and, in return, help with plowing and weeding the land. Maybe it's just folklore, but what I saw, those brown tiny people, were real. They may still be undiscovered. After the article was published, the public response was mixed. Some found it intriguing, but most mocked or dismissed it. Then, the following year, 1938, the same magazine published another similar sighting, this time from John Cuthbert Burgoyne, a British brewer. After reading Hitchens' report, Burgoyne wrote to Discovery magazine describing an experience he had in 1927. My wife and I were aboard a Japanese freighter sailing along the east coast of Africa, now Mozambique. We were close to land, and with a 12x zoom telescope, we could clearly see the shore. There was a sloping beach lined with scrub. Dozens of baboons were foraging, picking crabs and shells from the sand. Among them were two pure white baboons, extremely rare, but I'd heard of them before. As we watched, two brown, small creatures emerged from the bushes and joined the baboons. I'm sure they weren't any known monkey species, but they seemed accepted by the group, or the baboons would have reacted. They were too far to observe closely, but they walked upright like humans, about 4 to 5 feet tall, with a graceful posture. I was excited. These were clearly not any beasts I had seen or heard of before. Later, a hunter friend told me he, his wife, and 3 others had also seen a family of 3 similar creatures crossing a clearing in the same region. The local people even shouted to stop them from shooting. These back-to-back sightings over 2 years attracted the attention of many researchers. One of them was Professor Bernard Heuvelmans, often called the father of cryptozoology. In his 1955 book On the Track of Unknown Animals, he mentioned 2 more possibly related incidents. The first came from a 1924 issue of the Journal of the East Africa and Uganda Natural History Society. An author named Cook reported that on the Embu Plains, about 15 miles east of Embu Station in Kenya, stands a nearly 6,000-foot mountain called Gwangombe. Based on modern maps, this may refer to the highest peak in today's Gyeong-Gombe Forest Reserve at 5,920 feet. Local Embu people told Cook that the area was home to wild buffalo and a group of red little people who were fiercely territorial. Cook's translator, Old Sam, described his own terrifying experience. Once, he and a group of locals climbed near the mountaintop. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through, and they were attacked by flying stones, but they couldn't see where the stones were coming from. As they fled, Old Sam looked up and saw dozens of red little men standing on steep slopes, throwing stones and waving their arms angrily. To this day, even the bravest honey gatherers refuse to enter those mountains without good reason.
The second record comes from the year 1940 in a book titled African Novice, written by British professional hunter and gold prospector Roger Courtney. In the book, Courtney recounted a story told to him by his African guide Ali. Ali asked him, "Have you ever heard of the little people who live in the Mao forest? They're not as clever as monkeys, nor even as advanced as primitive tribes. They act very much like monkeys." Ali then shared a strange tale from his father. Many years ago, Ali's father was herding sheep on the slopes of Mount Longonot. One day, while following a trail of blood left by a stolen cow, he came to a cave and was suddenly captured by a group of dwarfs. When he came to his senses, he was shocked. He was surrounded by a strange tribe of small beings. He later told Ali, these Mao forest creatures were even more primitive than the pygmies of the forest. Although they didn't seem to have tails, they moved like monkeys swinging in trees. Their skin was pale, almost like the underside of a lizard, but their faces and bodies were covered in long black hair. They were almost like monkeys and didn't even seem to understand that the spear in a human's hand could be dangerous to them. That concludes the known sightings and records related to the Agogwe. Unlike the Kalanoro, which we've talked about before, the Agogwe are portrayed more like small, hairy wild men, rather than mysterious forest spirits or aquatic beings. Professor Bernard Heuvelmans proposed 2 main theories about the identity of the Agogwe in his writings. The first theory came from a man named George Sandlarat, a resident of Luanda, Ulungu.
He believed these little people might simply be small-framed, light-skinned humans, not mythical beings at all. According to Sandlarat, he had seen some tribesmen who were only slightly taller than the height often reported for the Agogwe. Their skin was light brown, and their appearance could easily lead to such legends. This theory was supported by Professor Havelmans himself.
The second theory, however, suggested that although pure-blooded Bushmen, Sand People, have now been largely driven into the Kalahari Desert, their ancestors once inhabited a much wider region of Africa. Their language even influenced nearly all of sub-Saharan Africa south of the Zambezi River, and their dietary and blood lipid traits also match some of the traits described in legends of small forest people. However, their bare and hairless skin indicates they could only be one possible prototype for such stories, not the exact beings that people claim to have seen. Next, Professor Heuvelmans introduced the most controversial theory regarding the Agogwe and similar little people. He proposed that these small primates might be descendants of Australopithecus. When we talk about Australopithecus today, we refer broadly to an early hominin genus that lived in Africa during the Pliocene and early Pleistocene epochs. They were believed to be early ancestors of modern humans, including the genus Homo, Paranthropus, and Kenyanthropus. Fossil evidence shows that most Australopithecus species were small and slender, standing around 1.2 to 1.4 meters tall, with males generally larger than females. Their brain size was similar to that of modern chimpanzees, and their ankle joints suggest bipedal walking, which means they were likely early upright walkers. Heuvelmans believed that based on everything we know, Australopithecines likely possessed a degree of intelligence. Faced with harsh evolutionary competition, it's possible that some of them instinctively retreated into safer environments, just as the Pygmy people of East Africa once fled from Maasai invasions. And what better place to hide and survive than the dense, unexplored forests? Over time, such a group may have evolved into a small, intelligent, upright walking race, well adapted to forest life. As for how these creatures might coexist peacefully with baboons, Heuvelmans suggested it could be due to a shared primate social instinct. This theory was endorsed by American science writer Willy Ley, but not everyone agreed. Scottish biologist Professor Ivan Sanderson had a different view. He believed the Agogwe were not related to Bushmen at all, but were a more primitive pygmy race, unique to Africa. According to Sanderson, while history has surely seen countless races and subspecies of ancient humans roaming Africa's forests and mountains, we don't need to invoke Australopithecus to explain them. He argued that true primitive tribes still exist in parts of Africa today, people who have survived centuries of enslavement and persecution by taller, dominant African ethnic groups. Those who escaped enslavement likely became more cautious and good at hiding. Both Sudanese in the West and Bantu peoples in the East still hold the belief that creatures like the Agogwe are indeed human, but represent an even older and more primitive race than the Bushmen.
In fact, small, hairy humanoid creatures that walk upright are not uncommon in the broader catalog of cryptids, especially in Africa. In 1986, Professor Bernard Heuvelmans published a classification in the 5th issue of the Journal of Cryptozoology, where he organized the already documented African hominid cryptids into two main categories, large and small. This included beings like the Sansandaria bones from West Africa, the Kakundakari of Central Africa, and the Tikaloche from the south. But when it came to small humanoid forest-dwelling creatures like the Agogwe, he listed 26 distinct types. Some were based on ancient legends from specific tribes. Others came from eyewitness accounts by local hunters. Yet the descriptions were remarkably similar across the board. In my opinion,
The possibility that such creatures exist is relatively high, certainly higher than some of the more fantastical beastmen I've discussed in past works. And let's not forget, people who have lived on the edges of the jungle for generations know how to tell the difference between monkeys and humanoid beings. I believe their ability to observe and report should not be dismissed lightly. Perhaps these beings are a new species of primate, still undiscovered by science, which may have evolved over time to walk upright. Or, perhaps, as Heuvelmans proposed, they are the last surviving descendants of Australopithecus. Either way, the truth about the Agui remains a mystery, and we won't deny these mysteries exist, nor will we stop exploring them. So when faced with the unknown, I hope everyone watching this can do the same. Speculate boldly, think rationally, learn widely, and observe deeply. And as always, the unknown will always be greater than the known. That's what makes UMA so fascinating. That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching.